And here we are. Welcome back to another of these podcasts. It's episode 38. One of these days, I'll remember that before we start this. 38.
I'm astonished after every time you say that.
I know.
I think I have the same reaction.
We're going to be over the hill here soon. That's a thing in podcasts, right? So we have Jack Duffley with us this week. You might recognize him because I know you all watch all of you.
I would hope so.
There's no one on this, but you all watched my video and then watched his video, of course. So, Jack, for anyone that didn't, those weirdos in the world, do you want to give a little intro?
Yeah, sure. First off, if you haven't checked out the Trey and I each reviewed each other's portfolios on our respective channels, so that was a lot of fun. Check that out. Learn a little bit more about my background as well there. But the short story is I'm a 23-year-old real estate investor, and I'm about to finish law school, where I will begin as a commercial real estate attorney shortly after that. And then my channel covers all things finance, mainly leaning towards real estate investment, but lots of good personal finance stuff in between. So it's a little about me.
Nice.
Very cool.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if cool is the right word, but hopefully sort of
on this podcast, the fact that you're 23 and already doing all this, that is very cool.
That's true. That is a true story.
I'm probably still illiterate, but I would hesitate to call you guys illiterate.
We were illiterate when we came up with the idea for this podcast. I don't know.
We were very much beginners.
I feel like you can never be like fully financially literate. I learned so much every week about finance. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's the whole point, right? Like if you think you know everything, then you'll stop learning. And I think that's kind of the mindset. We're always trying to learn more about this.
And stuff gets really, really, really dense once you get into like beyond just the basic passive investing stuff. You look at what hedge funds are doing, fee structures, and then beyond that, macroeconomic forces. There's all sorts of things that play, and it can be pretty difficult to follow even just one of those areas. So when channels try to do too much, it's not going to bode well with viewers either. So it's a weird world, and it's ever expanding. So
it sure is.
Right. You can't stop. You can't stop learning.
Stop.
There's the motto.
Yes. Do you have a poster of that in your room? Is that next to the Constellation one? Can't stop learning.
I'm going to write it down and just always have it on a Post-it note now.
You have a wall of Post-it notes somewhere?
It's actually, it's right here. I just have like a layer of Post-it notes.
That works.
Of little reminders of things to focus on.
I always got a checklist going in every day right in front of my desk in a similar spot to yours, I guess, just not Post-it notes.
That's a good practice. Yeah, I flip through Post-it notes of reminders, even down to things of like generally good moods to be in.
I got to start doing that a little more. I've been bitter wrapping up law school. I can't wait for it to be done. Done in a couple weeks.
Congrats.
Got the bar exam after that, but thank you. The bar exam I'm not looking forward to. It's basically a full-time job for 2 to 3 months studying for it, which is not fun. So, but I'll be able to practice law after that.
I could have never done it. I was never a studier. I was not good at that. It's like I either know it or I don't.
I kind of struggle with it too. I really don't consider myself a studier. Well, at least in like the academic sense, even though, I know I'm in law school, so I've probably done something decent in my academic career. But I really learn a lot more through lecture, and I usually don't take many notes. But discussing things is a really good way to learn things and lock them in. But if I'm just trying to focus on a book and for something that I don't really care about, which there are lots of areas of law that I don't care about, it can be very, very tiring. I really like real estate, of course. So the real estate law stuff I really enjoy because I can connect it to my life. But criminal procedure, I don't really care about because at least I don't think I'm ever going to practice that. But I have to learn it for the bar because when I get my license, I'm technically allowed to practice any area of law, which is also kind of crazy. But it's such a weird thing, the legal accreditation system, to where they try to make you a generalist, but no one will end up being a generalist. You'll end up specializing in something. So,
right.
And at that, like, I'm not going to be a great attorney after I finish the bar. I'm going to become a great attorney by learning from great attorneys on the job. But you could say that about pretty much any career.
That's very true. That was like me coming out of college, going into marketing. I quickly realized I actually knew nothing about marketing until I started working.
I mean, at least you started working in the thing you got a degree in.
That's true.
Oh, yeah.
Not everyone does that. Like I got my first degree in undergrad before law school was history and econ. And I feel like the history part like actually held me back from getting jobs. People would just see history and assumed I was like unhireable for anything in business. But it was I was humbled for sure after undergrad.
So I mean, were you? I guess when did personal finance or finance kind of come into the mix for you?
It was probably. I've always been, I think most entrepreneurial-ish people, or at least people who are interested in finance at some point, probably were interested as a kid in money in some way, whether it be starting, like little businesses on the side, trying to make an extra $1 or $2 per week, that sort of stuff. So I always had some sort of interest there. And when I got to college, I was trying to figure out a career path, and I was looking around, like, it seems like high-powered careers, lawyer, doctor, all that stuff, they make a lot of money, but they're not in the 1%. And what do the 1% do? And they all invest. So that's kind of what triggered that. I'm like, how can I try to mimic some of these practices that the 1%ers do that put them ahead of people who otherwise have really high salaries? Because there's kind of a ceiling on what you can make in your day with like an hourly job, as I'm sure you guys are well aware. So it was that frustration really that I was like, there's got to be a better way. Like, what's the secret? And that's where I discovered real estate investing, stock investing, all that great stuff. So, and I've just been diving into it ever since. So I guess we could say I'm like probably year 5 on the serious journey where I've really been trying to learn as much as possible about finance, investing, real estate, all that stuff.
So what was your childhood business where you tried to earn $1 here and there?
Yeah.
I have a tendency to be a dabbler. So it's something I really have to work on pretty hard, to not just kind of put one toe into 7 different things at once. Because if you can focus, you can really scale that way. It's hard to scale when you're doing 1,000 things at once. But I guess as a kid, let's see, when I was in elementary school, I made like little comics at one point. So I drew my own comics, copied them, and was selling them for like $0.25. I only sold like a handful, but it was kind of cool and exciting.
It's always fun to make the money.
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when you're a kid, right? Like it's like
any amount of money
amazing.
is fun. It's fun, even though like the $2 or so I made on net, like probably means nothing from a monetary perspective, but it's kind of that chase of some sort that it's I don't know if addicting's the right word, because that would make me sound like a scumbag. But
no, I'll go with like, addicting. I'll say it. It's addicting.
It's addicting.
It's satisfying for sure to like create something that someone wanted and then they give you money for it. Like that's pretty cool, and it's a win-win ideally, as that's what any sale is. So I've always kind of liked that. And now moving forward into my career now, it's like the thing I will be selling is legal services. So I want to produce a good product to where people refer me, to where my friends, connections in real estate will admire the work that I do. Maybe not admire, but they'll admire it enough to pay for it, I suppose.
There you go. They value it enough.
Yeah. And that system, it's very humbling in that way too, because if you don't provide something, you don't get something. So that's the beauty of capitalism, I suppose. It's
it's like offering help before you need help. That's usually the best way
you
to
can
get it.
You can only get what you give in a system like that, which is pretty cool. It's nerve-wracking at times, but when you make something work, it can be really exciting. So
yeah, I think that's a great way of thinking about it too. I was having a conversation earlier with someone, Andrew 227 on Yada Bank. He doesn't even use it anymore, but we were going to say that forever. I was talking to him about Disney. Because I own some Disney. I've been very happy with them the last few weeks. We were talking about how impressive it is. I think that they've they've been able to like instill the culture from like Walt Disney on, and like they've been able to keep that. And really like the core of it is around experience, right? Like why do they have tunnels underneath Disney World so employees can get around? Because they don't want your experience to be that you're at a place of work. So I think like that, I mean, it goes into our product development of any products we've built. And just like what you were saying with the experience of people you're working with, I think that's one of the most important things to think about when you're working on a business. And
for Disney in particular, it helps when you have like wicked IP rights that keep getting extended every year. Like, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with Disney, but all of their trademarks and a lot of their copyright stuff, since Walt Disney goes way back, like you were saying, they have a lot of special laws that extend all of those trademarks and everything that normally would expire. And it allows them to keep their monopoly on Disney products. Interesting. It's kind of a weird side effect of the corporate world, since a corporation lives as long as it can. Like there's no finite end to it until it winds up, but it doesn't have to wind up if shareholders don't want that to happen. Or I should say debt holders don't want that to happen. Yeah. They're this like fascinating combination of like amazing customer experience and then also attaching great business to that. Yeah. They have such an iconic brand. There are very few like it. Yeah. Like for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Justin, what childhood businesses did you start? Anything?
I was an entertainer as a child.
Please explain this.
Yeah. Entertainer.
I was big into BMX bikes and racing.
Okay, we're gonna need to show a video of that at some point on here.
So did you?
I wish there were videos, but what I would do.
You found a way to monetize that. Is what you're saying.
So yeah, my childhood friend and I would set up these ramps outside of the house and then knock on doors and invite people to our air show. And an air show is when we would jump off the ramps.
That's amazing.
And do tricks.
Far out, dude.
So,
that's amazing.
The only reason we thought about money, because it was one of those things that we just loved doing. So we were like, oh, we'll just do it for free. But one of the neighbors was like, oh, how much are you charging? And we're like, what do you mean?
$100.
He's like, doesn't it cost money to go see you guys perform? And we're like, oh, we could do something we love and get paid. Oh,
you need to send that neighbor like a Christmas card or something and be like, thank you for making me a capitalist at a young age.
Yes. And then my mom, before the BMX entertainer stint that I had, which was very brief, my mom taught me about ethics in business when I was maybe like 4 or 5 years old, because I discovered gold for some reason, and I would create these little mud balls, and I was like, Mom, if we paint these gold, we can sell them like they're gold. And we can sell them. And she's like, that's not really how this works.
It is if you sell them like they're gold. Yeah. Not that they are gold.
Let me tell you about fraud.
I never got the ethics course.
In that, I learned about fraud when I was very young.
Yeah. But think you clearly have the creative mind. The creative mind sometimes goes to dark places, and that's what the law is for. To keep that in bounds. Because
so Jack, it's great to meet you now because of this.
Yeah. None of this is legal advice, by the way.
Yeah.
Financial advice, to be clear.
I'm not even licensed. You're talking to a law student right now. So
none of us are lawyers, accountants, or financial advisors, to be clear.
Correct. None of this.
If you're getting
turn it
financial
off, guys. Don't even
Financial
listen to
Illiterates, like.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great name for the podcast. It's like, would you hear about that? The Financial Illiterates. It's literally in the name that we're not advisors.
It's a disclaimer in itself. Very good.
It's a branding thing.
It saved a lot of costs on drafting a nice big fat disclaimer at the end of the video.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's in the title, nice and easy and memorable. Yeah. That was one thing I was kind of worried about but not worried about starting a finance channel, because you see others like the big dogs, Graham Stephan, Meet Kevin, they're saying stuff all the time, and their disclaimers are really quick if they even have them in the actual video themselves. So I thought if YouTube really wants to crack down on it, they could if they're getting a bunch of legal problems, but it would just be, they'd find some way around it.
Yeah.
I try
to throw them in, but I have fun with mine.
I have not read yours to be
I just put them in the
honest.
videos, and I put this like radio voice
Oh.
on it in black and white.
Oh yeah. Those. I was thinking about in the description, but yeah, those are good.
No, I don't bother with that.
Yeah.
Justin, you were asking something?
Yeah, I was like, has YouTube ever cracked down on this type of stuff? YouTube, like finance disclaimers,
I'm sure they've changed stuff all the time. Like with, I'm sure when affiliate marketing started becoming really big on YouTube, they've probably added something to their policy, because a lot of YouTube has become so like money driven just over the past few years. Because you think back to like early YouTube, even after Google bought it, and when did they buy it? They bought it in the mid to late 2000s, I think.
Yep.
And it still wasn't like this corporate hub like it is now, where there's all these ads coming to it. I don't really know when that all started. At least I didn't notice it. So I'm sure it's changed a lot, actually, just all behind the scenes, and people just have to disclose stuff in there.
I know, like the Amazon Associates program, their affiliate program, for example, they have a requirement, or at least a very clear request, that you put noting that these are affiliate links of some sort.
Yeah. So stuff like that is expanded.
The URL of them.
Yeah.
Like you can't put them through a link shortener.
Right.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the URL has to be clear that it is an Amazon link.
Oh.
Which is a real bummer if you want to do any link tracking. It's kind of a pain in the butt to do.
Amazon does not help you out with analytics.
No, I know almost everything there is about the affiliates program, because this is now my 4th time trying to get into it. So
you haven't been able to get into it?
No.
What are they saying? I got into it when I had
they don't
no
even
stuff.
tell me. They just shut it down. I don't get any sales. Dude, Justin, the stuff that you bought through my like legitimate links, I never got commission for.
It never really.
No, it shows the sales. It doesn't. It says 0 commissions for it.
I think like, wait, what? Not everything gets commissions. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
This is photography equipment.
Okay, then that should. I don't know.
Gotta like it's nothing weird.
Do you have your own website, Trey?
Yep.
So yeah, that was linked to my personal website. That got it.
I don't know. I don't care too much, because like, my content doesn't drive much to Amazon affiliates. You know, like BlockFi is a whole nother story. That's a
good one.
Yeah.
Not many people are doing that one. Everyone's doing Webull and Robinhood, and a lot of people are doing M1 Finance.
Yeah, and I have those, of course. All the links are in the description.
Me too. We all do.
No, BlockFi is a fun one, because you get $10 in Bitcoin, which
that one's
hit
good.
22,000 today.
Yeah, I was actually surprised. I hadn't been looking at really any of the markets today, and then I opened up my Robinhood account, where I have $100 of Bitcoin in there that I bought in like February, and it's now $300. So it's like I should have put everything on that.
Sort of Bitcoin.
It's almost infuriating, because it's like, man, if I just put like all of my life savings like on Bitcoin in February, then I'd be rolling right now.
Robinhood's an interesting one, because when you buy Bitcoin in Robinhood, you don't technically own the Bitcoin.
It's the trust, right? Or the grayscale trust. Yeah.
Wait, what is this?
Yeah, you don't actually Robinhood doesn't set you up like a crypto wallet. You don't own Bitcoin.
Yeah, so I own like an interest in a trust that owns the Bitcoin.
Right.
And I think that's the grayscale trust, which is the big one.
Yeah.
I think they take like a 2% fee if I remember correctly. So weird. They're making bank right now, and they're pushing it super hardcore all over the major networks, like CNBC. Every single ad apparently is this grayscale trust trying to push more Bitcoin.
I think like they're leaning into the fact that crypto's a little intimidating to get into. Granted, there's a video on my channel if you want to check it out.
And it's hot. It's hot, most importantly.
It is,
look at the results. Buy in, It
is, but I wouldn't. I mean, personally, I wouldn't buy it on Robinhood just because I didn't actually own the asset that way.
That's why I only put $100. I only put $100 in. So it was just kind of like
$400
all
a
right.
day from crypto. That was wonderful.
It's nice.
Yeah.
And it's so weird, because it's like, I feel like with something like gold and other precious metals, you have like a slightly better idea of what's like a normal price based on the amount of money that's out there. It's very hard with Bitcoin, because it's never stabilized at like any level, and it's finite, so you think it would stabilize at some point, and it's a weird thing. And I wonder what the sort of base price would be based on like our current level of fiat currencies around the world.
There's
hard to tell.
There's a podcast you should listen to. It's shoot, I'm gonna have to look that up now. The Investors Podcast, I think is what it's called. Something like that. Bitcoin, maybe.
Sounds about right.
I'll find it here while we're talking. But there's this podcast that I listened to recently. It was their first in a series on Bitcoin, and it was incredibly great to listen to. Yeah, theinvestorspodcast.com. At the very top, there's like a Bitcoin link, and if you just listen to the first one, I haven't listened to any of the other ones yet, but listen to the first one. This guy is like the most knowledgeable person you'll probably ever listen to in terms of like currency, and like talks all about gold and how it became like the market decided currency and how that led to fiat and the 6 or 7 attributes there are for a currency and how Bitcoin satisfies all those. And it was very, very interesting. One of like the big things that changed my mind on Bitcoin is very fascinating.
One thing I don't understand is the like hate between Bitcoin bros and gold bugs. I don't get why they're clashing, because they both benefit from largely the same factors.
Because everyone likes to be right.
I guess. But I feel like they can both be right.
Yeah, they can. I own gold and Bitcoin.
Right. I own a lot of gold and a lot of gold stocks at the moment, which I'm kind of using as like
very little gold, but quite a bit of Bitcoin. I own very little gold, but quite a bit of Bitcoin.
Yeah. but I mean, the same factors again. The only argument I might make is that Bitcoin is currently more speculative because we don't really know what that sort of normal price is, if there is one, whereas gold's comparatively more stable. So you might have more upside with Bitcoin or more downside. It's hard to tell.
Yeah. I'd say in terms of speculative, I'd call it more volatile than speculative. Speculative implies that it can go to zero. I don't see it.
Yeah.
Just because like one of the big shifts for me on Bitcoin was shifting my thinking from thinking of it like a stock and thinking of it like a currency. That was a big like mental shift for me that helped me out a lot.
That's how I look at gold too.
Yeah, exactly.
It's I think Robert Kiyosaki calls it God's money.
Yeah.
Because it's always been there. Like but I push back on people who say like gold has all this intrinsic value, but it really doesn't. It's very little. Like you can use it for jewelry. I think it's in some like electronic components somewhere down the line, like very limited though. But like it doesn't have a lot of industrial use. So I don't like it when people like Bitcoin.
It has value because the market can decide that it has value. Right.
Right. Well, that's just like any other fiat currency. That's the thing.
But the fiat currency, the government decides it has value.
Yes and no. The government says a dollar is a dollar, but what a dollar buys is ultimately what people will accept. So, I mean,
yeah.
At some point with any currency, you get back to it just being like, well, we say this is what it's worth. Like gold, it's a rock. Like we just say it's worth this. And even if it's a gold-backed currency, it still ends up at that same result, if you know what I mean. So it's kind of a weird thing.
Listen to that podcast. I'll make sure I put it in the description of this, but I'll also send it to you. It was like a mind-blowing podcast, just from like a finance aspect, like just learning about currency. It was fascinating.
I like a lot of the kind of more doom and gloom macro guys, macroeconomics, like the Peter Schiffs of the world. George Gammon's another one who's up and coming. Real Vision with Raoul Paul.
Raoul Paul's great. He's actually he joins this podcast a lot.
Yeah, he's
so this was with
Robert
Breedlove. I don't know. I don't know how to say it, but that's who it was with. But yeah, Raoul Paul's on this quite a bit. It was a really good podcast. It took me like 3 weeks to listen to it, but
I always think it's important to get a bunch of different perspectives.
It is,
because any day you could pull up some perma bull who's always like rooting for everything to go up, and there will never be a crash because now it's different. You can find that any day. So I think it's healthy. At least I'll pat myself on the back and say it's healthy to get more perspectives.
It is. And Justin and I have talked about this on the podcast before about how we try to consume a bunch of different sources and then like take the bits and pieces that make sense to us. Right? Like whenever we were getting into real estate investing, it was a lot of the bigger pockets like Burr Method stuff, Grant Cardone, Meet Kevin, Graham Stephan, like all of those sources, and then we took pieces of each of them
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And really, if you get more, I tend to see like with smaller channels is they typically are a little more nichey when they're starting, because often it seems like the trend is start niche, and then as your audience expands, so do you, and you get more generalized. That seems to be what happens most of the time. So a lot of smaller ones will have like really focused perspectives on a particular thing, and it can be really good for getting a new perspective yourself on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
All this this whole crisis, I call it the currency crisis of 2020, with what central banks have been doing, and obviously the pandemic and all the debt in the system. Like it really got me interested in the topic, to where I had to write like a final seminar paper for law school, and I ended up really just writing a kind of an economic critique of the Fed, which had really not much to do with law. I kind of described the history of how the Fed got all of its power. It's kind of a weird thing, because like it was formed in 1913 with like pretty strict standards on the currency. Like they had to keep gold reserves, so they couldn't expand the currency super rapidly, because they had this kind of discipline built in. But within 20 years, when the Depression happened, the gold standard was basically thrown out the door, and all of a sudden you had this debt explosion from World War II on to now, that became even more crazy once we officially left the gold standard in the 70s. And that's where we've seen this amazing, mostly bull market since 1980 is conveniently when the gold standard was left, and we've seen interest rates go all the way down to zero. So it's troubling looking at it that way.
I think that's one of the really interesting things about the fiat currency side of things is it almost is like a bait and switch, right? Like we supported the fiat currency because it was backed by gold, which the market selected as a currency for better or worse, right? Yeah. And then the government's just like, trust us, we got this.
Yeah. Well,
we don't actually got this. We don't actually got the gold, but trust us, that paper is still just as good.
What's shocking about that was like the Bretton Woods system, where which is another kind of mind-boggling thing, that foreign central banks could turn their dollars in for gold, but U.S. citizens couldn't. That's what we had up until 79, which is just kind of weird to think about in itself. But yeah, we were just issuing all this currency that we didn't have gold reserves for, and then we just screwed everyone. Yet the dollar still remained the reserve currency after that, because everyone went fiat. So it's
everyone went fiat pegged to the dollar.
Yeah, which is just
that's the great thing. It's like all the fiat currencies are pegged to the dollar.
Like if there would have been like a shift, you would have maybe expected it then, but it didn't happen, because I guess everyone was fiat at that point. Yeah. And what's like Ray Dalio, he covers it. He covers kind of the big, large, long scale history, long-term history of currencies. And it's humbling as an American who benefits from this dollar as a reserve currency system, because we're not the only reserve currency there's ever been. Long ago it was the Dutch guilder, then it was the British pound, then it became the dollar in like the 1800s when we started booming. And are we nearing the end of that cycle now, to where the yuan or Bitcoin or whatever is going to be the next reserve currency? So I feel like we're nearing that historical crossroads. If something doesn't change, and doesn't look like anything's going to change, we're going to keep printing the money into the ground. So
exactly.
I wonder what that shift will be, though. Will we just go to another fiat system? That seems kind of weird if the fact it was fiat was the problem in the first place. So we shall see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah, I think, and this is where like I think starting to diversify my currency makes more sense to me, because as you go deeper down the fiat currency rabbit hole, you're like, oh my God, this is like a house of cards.
Oh yeah, it does feel like that.
Like it is just straight up like a house of cards. I'm like, oh my God.
And one thing that really frustrates me about the whole currency discussion is like, when people say we have low inflation, it's like, yeah, technically we have low net inflation in that prices like from last year aren't going up, but the natural course of things is for prices to go down. Like in the 1800s, for example, when we didn't have incredible currency printing, not that we didn't have some currency devaluation, like with the Civil War, for example, but after the Civil War, purchasing power went through the roof, because stuff started getting so much cheaper as production got better, people got more productive, more educated. but we didn't have a collapse. Like deflation's not a bad thing in itself. It depends on what's causing the deflation. If it's productivity, it's great because now you can buy more with less because people can produce more. So in that way, like savers nowadays get screwed because if you save, that same good that normally would have been cheaper before is now going to be more expensive because the government's printing a bunch of money to pay for it, which in turn favors debt, and because debt will also lose its value with inflation. And it creates this whole debt-laden, inflation-dependent system that's very hard to unravel because it's a house of cards, like you said, Trey.
Yeah.
So
Kevin, I think, just did a pretty good explanation of that today.
He
I was
did.
watching of his earlier where I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. He's like, because he was basically saying like technology is supposed to make things cheaper, but we're basically intentionally making them more expensive to
right, exactly. I was glad he said that. I was glad he said that because normally he says just, inflation's low. It's like, not really. It's more like we're canceling out a bunch of deflation, which might be beneficial to a lot of people. It might hurt a lot of debtors who have a ton of debt attached to assets that might lose some value compared to the currency, maybe, depending on how productive they are. That's where it gets tricky is, the central banks and the invested class, do they really have an interest in helping out savers, or do they have an interest in helping out themselves when they have a lot of debt and a lot of assets to prop up?
And that's Justin, like something we talk about a lot is like, you gotta learn the game in society and in America, game. Right? Like a lot of people are just really mad that like Amazon is paying so little to nothing in taxes, right? But we elected people and we designed the game to work that way. Maybe not we personally, but we, the society, designed the game to work that way. It's sort of same thing with like debt and inflation, right? Like debt's more powerful if we keep the inflation thing going the way that it's going. And it's, it leans in the way of people that are not saving, which are not like the top 1%. They're the people investing with large amounts of debt. People like really bashed on Trump, whatever you think about Trump, for having massive amounts of debt. And I just look at that like, but like that's pretty normal for someone
He's incentivized to do it.
Right?
That's the game.
Like,
it's part of the game.
Like I have a ton of debt too.
Same here.
I'm closing on another mortgage right now. Like, what will this be like? Probably like $750,000 in debt here by January.
That's what you're saying is like, I don't like the system. I think the system's like long-term terrible. Like it's not sustainable. But am I just going to watch my purchasing power get destroyed by inflation? Like, no, I'm going to play by this game because that's the game.
Right.
And even if you don't like it.
I don't even have an opinion of whether I like the game or not. I just play the game.
Right.
We didn't choose.
I can decide whether I like the game or not once I have the power to change the game.
The funny thing is, like, whether we like it or not, everyone is in the game. Some people are just care a little more about it.
Well,
refuse to play.
But even if you move back to a gold-backed currency, or if we deleverage the whole system, there's a lot of political temptation in the short term because terms are only 2 to 6 years if you're a governor. It's all short-term focused on getting reelected. Who's to say that it just doesn't go right back to that again?
Exactly.
Go right back to fiat, go back to debt, go back to paying for things that we don't have money for now, especially like consumption and all these proposals for UBI, as great as they might be if we could afford them, we don't have the money for them. So how are you going to pay for it? Well, you're going to debase the currency, and that's going to hurt the people that you're trying to help in some way because stuff's going to get more expensive. So it's
exactly.
That's the political game. That's another game next to the debt game.
Yeah, it's a whole nother game, and like I'm a lot more cynical in our politics. I don't want to get too deep into politics here, but I think it's basically like a net neutral game, right? You get one side elected, and they cancel out what the last side did. You get the next side elected, they cancel. Like it's basically a cancel. Yeah. It's literally a zero-sum game. So
sort of, yeah. Right now it's a weird because when I was in middle school, for example, and into high school, I remember the national debt and Social Security being such like humongous issues. It's like, how are we going to pay for these things?
Yeah.
Like, look at the debt. It's going to collapse on us. And then all of a sudden, 10, 15 years later, it's like it's not an issue now. We don't care about the debt. And it's like, this is a gigantic elephant in the room that we're completely ignoring now. So I would just hope that both parties, either party, one of them would just really focus on the debt in some capacity. Not that we don't have other issues too, but this is probably going to be the largest issue of the century. And I'm saying that in the midst of COVID, which obviously is terrible too. But this debt problem is going to have so many larger scale problems, and the currency devaluation that would come with it, at least, whether it be deleveraging or the currency devaluation through inflation. It's scary stuff. And I hope we don't face it, but it seems like we will at some point. I don't know when it'll be. No one does. But anyways, enough.
I hope it doesn't affect my real estate debt.
Yeah, exactly. Typically, if you buy assets,
you should be
mortgages. should be in a better spot than if you didn't have assets, because you have something with value, and hopefully it'll maintain some value after that. So
yeah, exactly. I think that's a key piece that a lot of people don't understand is like, and it's hard to really put into words, like the good debt, bad debt sort of idea, right? Like whenever we reviewed each other's portfolios, like we both have a pretty large amount of debt in dollar value versus like what the typical American has. But 95% of our debt is in assets that are paying us back,
Right. Yeah. That's something that especially my generation with student debt, it's just amazing that an 18-year-old who has no idea what's going on. Like,
student debt is just ridiculous.
I was relatively financially astute, not like amazing. I bet
I wasn't.
Like, thankfully, I had nice parents who helped me through undergrad, which is great. But not everyone's in that position. And if I think that I need a degree to succeed, which a lot of people do, then you have you suddenly walk into 6 figures of debt. And now what? Now when you're done, you're like, wow, this degree I got is worthless because I didn't really do anything in college. I didn't take advantage of the opportunities because I didn't know what to look for. Whatever it is, now you're hamstrung and can't go get the good debt to buy things that would help you out. So it's such a nasty system. But
it is. It's so
the game got nasty.
It's so easy to get student debt. And then it's
way too easy.
Uncancelable. Like you can't even get out of it through bankruptcy. It's ridiculous. Like that whole thing is that's like just obvious preying on the weak there.
Yes and no, only because it's the taxpayers are going to have to pay for it at some point. I think even if we don't forgive everything, the Department of Education or someone just put out a study that said like 400 billion out of the 1.6 trillion is just, it's never going to be paid.
Right.
And that's what exists and it's growing every day, So, that's like current if we don't do any sort of waiver, but like who's paying for that? Well, the taxpayer's paying for it because it's on the government's balance sheet, and the government's balance sheet is made up by either printed currency or taxes. So
when you say the taxpayer, you mean people without massive deductions that get them down to zero taxes.
Yes, the taxpayer, not the tax waiver.
The taxpayer,
whatever you want to call it. Yeah.
I think like the whole concept of like not paying taxes and I don't know. I mean, I'm obviously biased here. I haven't paid taxes in like 4 years, and that's not because I haven't not filed.
You took that entrepreneurial risk.
Yeah,
got those business deductions.
Yeah, it's like, I've gotten massive returns the last 4 or 5 years, and like it maybe isn't quote unquote fair, but it's how it works.
The people who really get hammered are. I actually did a lot of this past winter. Right before the pandemic happened, I was doing income tax preparation for people part-time. It was like through a nonprofit. And I was helping people fill out their tax returns so long as they made like less than something like 45 grand a year as a family. So lower income is like median or lower pretty much. And most people who came in actually got something in return. There's a lot of tax credits for people who make that sweet spot of like 40 grand or less. If you can call it that, from a tax perspective, it's a sweet spot where your standard deduction covers a lot, and then you can often get credits in return if you have kids or whatever. But everyone over that, until you get to business person, entrepreneurial level, so like basically the whole middle class, like it's a ton of income taxes to pay relative to their income, and it's like it's kind of awful. Like, who designed that?
business owners.
Yes, I guess so. So the tax system in itself, it's so mindlessly complicated. And I say this as someone who's going to be an attorney. I feel like a lot of those jobs, accountant, attorney, a lot of analysts even, really those jobs should not exist, at least in the size that they do now. But the reason they do is because it's complying with this man-made system we have of taxes, laws, regulations that make everything complicated to where you now need a professional to do it. So it's this weird man-made career.
And it's like, I mean, that's like some of the advice that I give almost everyone is like hire an accountant. It's like TurboTax doesn't get you anywhere near what like good knowledgeable accountant gets you. Is like I've never paid for my accountant ever. And she's a very expensive accountant. But I've never paid for my accountant.
You get so much more in return because and she knows how to do the system.
Hire an accountant and start a side hustle so you can get some deductions on your business. Like those two little things can massively change your tax implications.
Especially over a few years, that's a lot of savings adding up too, which can compound. We love compound interest here on the Financial Illiterates.
What's compound interest?
where your interest makes interest. Your interest has babies. And the babies have babies. It's great. It's magical.
Infinite interest.
The infinite money loop.
Robin Hood Infinite Money Hack. Remember that one?
Yeah, that was crazy.
I never keep more than like $5,000 in my Robin Hood account.
I'm just like, God, I wish I could have figured that out.
Yeah, you better have guessed right before they figured it out. A lot of interest costs there too.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was crazy. Okay, so something that we like to ask people whenever they come on the podcast is, how do you define retirement?
How do I define retirement?
Yep.
As opposed to financial independence?
Just how do you define retirement?
All right.
Keep it very broad. Because
if you were to retire early, what does the retire part of that mean?
Well, I separate retire and financial dependence. Retire, I see as like you're not working. Like you were literally retiring to doing nothing. Or not nothing, but like hobbies, not necessarily being productive.
Okay, yep.
Whereas financial independence is usually a requisite for retirement, since you got to have some sort of money coming in. Financial dependence means that you have the option to make an independent choice to retire or to keep working or to do whatever. That's how I kind of define it.
It's a good description. Yeah, I think that's like the more typical definition of retire that I expect. That's the definition of retire where I'm like, I'm never going to do that.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine. I always say them interchangeably though in conversation. I say retire, and it's like I'll like tell my family like, yeah, I'm trying to retire early, or at least I was saying that more often. Like I'm trying to build up this real estate portfolio. That's going to be a big driver. Trying to retire early. They picture retirement like that, like, oh, I'm just going to play video games all day and do nothing. It's
on the
like,
beach.
Yep.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I will definitely spend time on the beach, but it's not going to be. I'm not aiming for like a 0-hour work week because I want to do something. I mean, like this YouTube channel, for example, that I'm trying to build, and that's fun. It's a lot of work though, but I want to keep doing stuff like that, creative stuff that's also productive. Got the over here. Got the book behind me. I published that this year. That was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of work and stuff like that where I can try to provide value in different ways other than just trading my time for money. It's it's technically trading my time, but it's scalable, and that's exciting in itself.
Yeah, it's I was having a conversation with my co-founder of the last company the other day about founders of companies. You know, like investors, they trade money for money, right? They figure out how to put money in and leverage that to make more money. Whereas founders, they're kind of like hourly workers where you trade time for money, except it's leveraged. It's almost like it's almost like investing your time into futures, where it's like by default 3x leverage or something like that. It's an interesting concept. We were debating the merits of founding versus investing in startups the other day.
I think that's a good way of putting it, because futures you have to execute. It's not like an option where you can just
it's all by default margined. Yeah.
It is like a future. That's a good way of putting it. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to like think about because you're like, yeah, most of the time you are putting some money in, but like Andrew, for example, he didn't put any money into the last company. He put all time in, and that time leveraged into a fair amount of return so far, and hopefully soon even more.
Right.
And like it's interesting because you are exchanging time for money, but then on top of that, you're also getting this extra little piece for your time that can turn into large amounts of money. It's kind of hard to like describe exactly how that works to people.
Because stock it's the value, or at least it should be. The value should be based on future earnings. So any stock you get is going to be based on your future earnings. So that's where the leverage comes in.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I like that.
Yeah, it's intriguing. But yeah, no, that definition of retire, I think that's what I think of when I think of retire, and I'm like, it's just never going to be me.
No,
I'll retire when I'm in my grave.
like when I'm like old, my tastes could change. I don't know, but what I'm picturing, what I want to do is like run nonprofits. Like a nonprofit housing company would be a lot of fun. Like just building houses for low-income folks in expensive areas, not expensive areas, whatever. Like that would be a lot of fun. And running a charity to like, I had a family member who passed from ALS. Like I'd love to be part of that. Mm-hmm. You have interests outside of maybe your own productivity, but it's like now it's helping some social good or whatever it is you're interested in.
Have you looked at opportunity zone investing at all?
I haven't looked at it in like for myself. I'm familiar with it. That's like where you can, it's tax deferral, right? Not total avoidance. You get to defer your capital gains taxes if you invest in certain areas throughout the country. Right?
Yes. Yeah. It's like a 15-year deferral or like it's something ridiculous. Yeah. I was just talking to my accountant the other day about it. But your money's locked up in it, right? For that period of time.
Right.
But yeah, I was just curious. He was talking about building in potentially low income areas.
Yeah, that's kind of like
you dug into that much. I haven't dug in too much myself.
Yeah, that would be a good for-profit tool in that the government is footing the bill for you that you might be footing if you were doing a nonprofit or where you're not taking a profit or whatever. So it's an interesting idea. That's another one of those game rules.
It
part
is
of this game.
Yeah, no, I was talking in the context of like selling some private equity shares, and there's going to be decent capital gains there. And one of the options is to put that money into an opportunity zone investment.
True.
And then you can defer the capital gains for like 15 years.
And then you can build a substantial return on top of that.
Exactly.
Now, what if you did a 1031 exchange after that? Like at the end of the 15 years, would that?
I mean, probably that would be a thing, right? Like you defer the capital gains through real estate and then 1031 the real estate through your death.
Would the 15-year one
that's a thing?
Carry with it?
I don't know that for sure. Obviously, we are the financial illiterates. Don't
that's
go
a good
into
question
this.
That's a good question for an accountant. Who,
but that's part of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
That would be a kind of a hack.
Yeah,
that's a game hack.
I mean, that's what the
cheat
game
code.
is, right? It's all cheat codes and hacks. It's like who knows the best cheat codes and hacks, and that's what you hire accountants and lawyers for.
Yeah.
They
help design
the
system.
Books that have the list of those. It's like when you bought the game books back in the day.
Oh yeah,
and they would have like all the
I only got one of
ways
those
to
as a
get
kid.
through those and like the cheat codes. And
I forgot about those.
That's pretty much what an accountant and a lawyer are.
Cheat codes.
and they're the people who design these codes too. And it's like one of the more hilarious things is the lawyers. Like every state has its own ethics code for attorneys, and it's so they all look about the same because they're all based on like a model code. And it's so silly how like circular and convoluted and complicated it is. Like it's an ethics code. You'd think it would be simple, like don't lie, protect your client's information, just basic things that you'd kind of expect. But there's all these carve outs for particular practice areas, particular types of defendants, all these different things. And it becomes super complicated and hard to actually like, wait, is that violating a rule? And I don't know, maybe that's the goal. It's to get you to question whatever you're doing because you don't remember if it's a rule or not. So I just find it funny that even the ethics rules for attorneys are complicated. And there are ethics attorneys who will advise people on whether or not they're making an ethics violation when they're doing something.
I didn't know there were ethics attorneys.
Yeah,
there's an attorney for everything, dude.
Exactly.
Wow.
There is.
That's actually, I find, one of the hardest parts of hiring an attorney is figuring out what kind of attorney you need for the thing.
Yeah.
Is there like a general attorney you go to first? And then
I go to my accountant. No joke. I go to my accountant for that question.
This is my referral attorney who refers me to other attorneys. Like,
because your accountant's probably worked with all of the attorneys.
Yeah.
So, generally, my accountant can answer that question.
Yeah, or like a real estate agent, or
real estate agent,
like you're saying.
Good one. Yep.
Other professionals outside of the industry can usually give you like an unbiased, like, exactly. Like, do this guy or girl or whatever, because because the law, like we were saying, is so specialized in each area. Yep. Real estate by itself is so dense. There's so many things in it, and every state's a little different. So you have to be specialized if you're going to really be a high performer most of the time. Not that some people can't juggle multiple practice areas, but usually they're going to be really interrelated anyways. Like you see a lot of estate planners who are also real estate attorneys. But that'll be different than like a corporate attorney or an ethics attorney, whatever it is.
Ethics,
So I'm curious about one item that popped in my head when you were talking about something else previously, and it might not be something you've thought about at your age, but it's something I'm starting to think about a lot more. Do you think about in the future like legacy stuff? Like building a legacy for yourself.
Yeah. Like for me personally or my family, what do you mean?
Yes.
Okay. Both.
Having a quote unquote legacy, whatever that means.
So, yes. And I have thought about it. One thing, I don't have kids yet, but my wife and I will have kids at some point. Probably within the decade. That's the goal. Definitely within the decade.
Good luck.
Yeah, barring disaster, of course, which hopefully
I meant with the kids. Good luck with the kids.
Yes, thank you. But we're looking forward to it. Anyways, one thing that I'm really, really worried about is if I'm going to have this big portfolio, if I'm doing well financially, I'm going to be worried about raising kids with a big sense of entitlement, because that's really hard to shake. And I'm very conscious of that now, even though I'm not super wealthy right now. But since I'm trying to be, you got to put yourself in that mindset. That's one thing I'm worried about. I don't know how I'm going to address that. Obviously, I want to help my kids, but I don't want to create.
I spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Yeah, because I mean, you're much further down the road than I am, so you're in the thick of it now.
I'm not at the point where like it would impact my kids, but my goal is, like you said, to be at that point. So it's like, how do I mitigate that as much as possible?
But even now, like you have a transparent YouTube channel. All the information's out there. I want to be very transparent with my kids so they learn these things, because hopefully they can help them succeed. Whether they want to do it or not, I don't really care, but they should know. So I'm going to show them how real estate works, how investing works, taking risks, entrepreneurialism, like whatever it is. But at the same time, they're going to see like, wow, mom and dad, you guys have a lot of money. Can I have a car? Like that sort of stuff. Like, so that could be challenging. Every kid's going to be different, obviously. But just trying to work through that mentally before they're even here. It's kind of one thing I work on. And then the other thing, like, I guess from a personal legacy standpoint, I'm very much into the Carnegie sell-off at the end of life. I know it's one thing that the estate system like really encourages people to pass on a lot of wealth to their kids. That's a big motivator for a lot of people. It's not a big motivator for me personally, not that I don't care about my family, of course, but I want to avoid that entitlement thing. So my thinking is like, I really think people who get really wealthy should have some duty. I don't want to say what people should or should not do, but some sort of duty to give back to society in some way. And I feel like just kind of giving your grandkids all of your money isn't necessarily the most productive way to do that. Because if you amassed a lot of wealth, you're probably pretty good with money and pretty good at running operations. Why don't you use those skills at the end of your life to run a really helpful operation? Like Carnegie built hundreds or thousands of libraries across the nation. Rockefeller started University of Chicago, other ventures,
Yep.
That's kind of the legacy I want to leave towards the end of my life if I have a lot of wealth, which I'm aiming for. And then, of course, like there'll be hopefully some good informational products out there. I don't know if YouTube will be permanent, but I'll have books out there, video content, whatever content. I want to have some of that there because that's permanent. And that can help people well beyond my family. So that's another kind of legacy goal to answer your question, which was a very good one. What about you, Trey?
I was curious about that. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. Like one part, like you mentioned, is how do you be wealthy and raise kids that are not shitheads, right?
Exactly. It is a common problem among wealthy people, or at least it seems like it.
Yeah, and I think like that extends even like down below wealthy to like upper middle class, even like
absolutely does. It's a human thing.
One of the methods we use right now is we have a point system for our kids. They earn points for doing things that are outside of expectations, right?
That's nice.
Or things that we really want them to do. Like our youngest has this habit of waking up at 1 a.m. and coming and sleeping in bed with us. We want him to not do that anymore. So he earns 200 points, which is equivalent to $2. 1 point, 1 penny, because that's easy for the next part of this equation. And then they can spend their points on whatever they want. But what's really nice about that is, one, eventually I want to teach them about investing and earning returns and compound interest on those points. They're not quite old enough where that would make sense, but eventually I want to get there. But now, like when we go to the store and they're like, oh, hey, can I have that? Well, you don't have enough points for that. That's the answer I give them. Not no, or not right now, or
I don't
not
feel like
today.
It.
I don't ever buy them anything. They buy themselves things.
Yeah.
And like if they want to buy something absolutely ridiculous, then they buy something absolutely ridiculous if they have the points for it.
You give them an incentive to learn something too, which is super important for kids. Because there's no incentive.
I'm sort of like partially teaching them to want to be wealthy because I have an app to track these, and whoever has the most points gets a star.
Ooh.
And they love the star. They're like, do I have the star? Thing? No, you don't have the star. Your brother does. I want the star.
Dude, I see a whole product around this. You're like gamifying financial education for kids.
Yeah, it is. It's from a book that I read. This idea came from, and it's really interesting. I think in terms of like breaking that whole idea of like giving them everything they want, right? Like when I was brought up, like I was in a middle to upper middle class family, right? Like I had a floor, like that I know a lot of people in the world and country never had, right? I never had to worry about whether I was going to get fed, never had to worry about whether I was going to have a place to live, didn't have to worry about that stuff. But I also wasn't handed everything, my first car, I bought my first car.
Right.
And my mom's like, if you buy an automatic, we'll get it for you. But no, I wanted that stick shift Eclipse because that was in the Fast and the Furious. So
right. Freedom of choice is a big deal with kids too, so long as they have ownership over it.
Yeah.
So if it's just freedom of choice, like you give them whatever they want with no consequence, then you're going to create entitled brats, most likely.
Yeah.
Some kids might end up fine, even if you spoil them. Some still end up fine.
Exactly.
They're not entitled.
Yeah. And I spent
that process.
I spent a lot of time kind of thinking about the legacy, like after death part of it, right? Like I don't want to just get rid of everything. I spent a lot of time building things up, and part of that is so that my family can be good. But I also don't want to give like a $10 million trust fund to each of my kids when I die, right?
Right.
Because like I want them to have that like work ethic. So the idea that I've most played around with currently is like putting a trust together for each of them that would effectively pay out like the median American salary annually every year, right? So they could live off that if they'd like and just have an average American life and be okay with that. Or they could work and do more.
That's kind of a lot.
It is.
If I do say so myself.
Yeah, no, it is. So I'm still playing with the idea, but that's kind of where I'm at currently. It's like
I went and saw Kevin O'Leary speak about 2 years ago. I love him too. He has a great YouTube channel. If you haven't checked it out, it's actually phenomenal. You wouldn't think it from his Shark Tank.
Yeah, no, exactly. He's got an odd brand.
He's a tool, but he's like a total tool in Shark Tank.
Yeah.
But he's a weird guy with a lot of wisdom. But anyways, he's got kids. Mm-hmm. He's very wealthy.
Yep.
And at his seminar, it was a free seminar, by the way, so it had all these sales pitches in front of it. But when he finally came out to talk, he was talking a lot about entitlement and his approach to it. Mm-hmm. And the way his parents did it to him is that once he hit 18, he was just off. He was cut loose. Yep. Like, you got nothing. Got to go find a place for yourself. You're done. You don't get anything.
Yep.
Which is, for a wealthy family, that's kind of extreme because, like, you have a lot of money to give. And it clearly worked out for him. I don't know if it'll work out for his kids, but that's what he's doing with them. He told this funny story about how when he flies in business class while his kids will like fly in the back, like in economy class on planes.
That's funny.
And his punchline at the end of the show was I don't want to call it a show. At the end of his seminar, was his son comes and asks him, "Dad, like, why don't I get to go fly up in front with you? Why are we back here?" And he said, "Son, you don't have any money." And that's how he ended it. I was like, and he got a standing ovation. It's hilarious. Yeah. So like that's what he does. Mm-hmm. And I know, like, I think Steve Jobs left nothing for his kids. Yep. I think Bill Gates is trying to do something similar, but I'm sure the reputation of their parents precedes them. I don't know how much. I've never been in their shoes, but I don't know I don't think there's a right answer. It's kind of whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's
whatever
all personal,
gets you.
Right?
It's whatever gets you going.
I think I'm definitely in the point where right now, right, my kids are 5 and 3, almost 4, right, and like I haven't been able to teach them anything where they can learn how to build a business or even understand that that's a thing. So like my mindset's way more in the like give them a safety net. But maybe when they're in their teens and like they've learned that stuff, then my mindset will shift a bit towards like, well, they got the tools.
I think there's a balance here too, but I think there is value in like really clarifying what they actually are entitled to, if anything.
Exactly.
Say like, this is what you get, no more, no less. Do with it what you will, but that's it. And you clarify that earlier rather than later. At the same time, you could be like really frustrating them, and then they hate you. And
it's a weird balance.
Where it gets dicey.
To be fair, though, as a parent, they will hate you.
Yeah, no matter what you do,
that's your job. If they don't hate you, you're not doing your job as a parent.
Human nature, entitlement. Yeah, it's
just going to get worse for me as time goes on. Because, like I said, they're 3 and 5. Like they still love me, but they still hate me.
The question is, why do they hate you?
Exactly.
Is it because you're actually being mean, or it's because you're trying to help them and now they have to work for it? You know,
That's a very important distinction. Yep. So many people are trying to be like best friends with their kids, and like I love my kids and I'd love to be best friends with them, but that's not practical.
What do you mean by best friends?
Best friends meaning, well, I mean, I guess like maybe the average person's definition of best friends is like the person that hypes you up all the time, that always agrees with you, right? Like that's not my definition of best friends, right? Like,
you want to have like a mentor
Justin relationship. And I are good friends because when I want to buy this house, he's like, "You're kind of crazy for doing that."
Because you guys are you look at each other as equals.
Yeah, so, you push on each other. Whereas
whereas with your kids, you're a mentor. I would assume that's what you want to be, a mentor to your kids.
A mentor and an enforcer of rules, right? You know, everyone's got different perspectives on that side of things, but I came from a rather strict family, and I think it did pretty well. So I'm doing very similar.
On the back there, Trey.
Yeah. Applaud to Trey and his parents.
I feel like I was set up pretty well for life, and so it's like I've spent a lot of time.
Important.
I've spent a lot of time over the last 5 years, like trying to understand what it was about my childhood that led me to where I am. Right.
Yeah.
The podcast that I was on recently, this is going to sound like a brag, but the Millionaires Podcast that I was on recently, I think it comes out.
Are you a millionaire, Trey?
I think it comes out in January. I mean, I don't want to brag.
Okay.
It comes out in January. But they asked some really intensely insightful questions that I was not prepared for in the least. Is like, where does your entrepreneurial spirit come from? And like, you really had to dig deep to
stuff.
understand them. And I've done a lot of that with like, as starting to raise kids, like understanding like, what was it about my childhood that instilled X and Y and Z? And it's kind of hard to identify. And it's a very fascinating journey to go on as a parent. It
is. Well, I'm not a parent, but like,
I feel like the old man of this group right now. So
you kind of are. Justin, how old are you?
I just turned 30.
He's 40 or so.
All right, I'm the real young one here.
Yeah, then Trey's 40, so
no, yeah, I'm not 40, bro.
Trey's 55.
Oh, dude, I was so okay. Yeah. We're gonna wrap this up after I go on this quick rant. I was so upset. I was so upset. So Justin has been making fun of me for being old ever since I turned 30. So now for like 2 or 3 years, he's been making fun of how old I am, right? So I'm like, dude, when you turn 30, I am going to have the most old man party for you in Vegas. You know when he turned 30? During a fucking pandemic.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
I planned that out perfectly.
Same. I just scathed by with my wedding, and to that, because I got married in 2019 in August. So like, we're talking less than a year before this happened.
Yeah, just before.
Just made it. And like, now that I have a wedding ring, like it actually became kind of a big deal, because I'd say my goals to people and like what I'm trying to do, and they're like, it's crazy. You're so young. You're so naive. Why are you getting married so early? But now I look and feel older now that I have a wedding ring on, even though I'm no older than I was. And it's just weird, the change in how people, just at first, when they get to know me, then people are fine. Like, just people get that kind of reserved approach at the beginning, and it kind of erased a lot of it. It's very funny how things work with simple
society.
I feel like if people are saying that you're crazy, you're on the right track.
Yeah. That's why I like this YouTube space. I could talk with you guys about it all day. You guys are like, yeah, let's go. Like, I like that. And
it's like, those are reasonable goals. Those are very attainable.
Yeah, exactly.
1,000 subscribers, 4,000 hours.
What are you trying to say? What are you trying to say? I have to pump it up now. Like, it's a very supportive and informative community. So I really like that. And that's why I want to keep building my own brand on YouTube. And I hope that you guys do the same. So thank you for having me on, by the way.
Yeah, no, it was great having you. If you are listening, check out Jack's channel. The link is already in the description, because I got all prepared for this beforehand this time.
I'm honored.
I'm proud of myself. It was really just because I wanted to watch Billions all the way up until the time that I had to come down here. If you haven't watched Billions, it's a great show.
Fantastic.
No, but
thank you, Trey.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks for doing the collab on the YouTube channel. It was a good time.
Likewise.
And, look forward to having you on again.
Sounds good. And Trey, you'll be coming on to my show at some point. Justin, I'll have to get you on at some point too. I can't leave you hanging. But Trey will be on my show sometime early next week. So be on the lookout for that.
Yes.
Awesome.
And as always, you can find us on YouTube. If you're listening to this as the podcast, Trobrook.com/TFI is the easiest way to get to it. Or you can go to the Financial Illiterates, ILLITERATES. I have not done that in a long time. .com.
You nailed it.
And Twitter, Trobrock, and Twitter, Gustin Jabriel. And we'll see you guys next time. Peace.